All right, everyone. Thank you for coming. We've had a little technical difficulty here, so we apologize. So we know everyone's got some time allotted here, so we will swiftly move through the front part of this presentation. Welcome to the Community Forum. I'm Scott Fortner, Executive Director at Visit Sun Valley, and with me is
Harry Griffith, Executive Director, Sun Valley Economic Development.
We're going to jump in for a little two-day session here. We'd like to thank the library and for all the fine folks helping put this together. We also have a few of our board, both our boards here in attendance, giving us at least somebody other than ourselves to talk to, which is
refreshing.
Great. Yes. Ray, there you go. I want to thank everyone of all of our collaborators, our board, our advisory committee that we work with, and our funding partners. Obviously, it's been a challenging last couple of years, and with their help, we've, I think, been able to weather this storm and continue to better than most, for sure.
And we'd like to thank our partners, our members, both public and private. Again, we couldn't have done it without you, so thank you for helping us through this difficult period.
A little housekeeping. The slides and the video are being recorded. There will be a toolkit that will be available to everyone, which we'll email out to all the attendees that they'll have. The key thing, though, is all the questions that you have, go ahead and put them in the chat on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll take all those questions at the end of each track after each session, and we'll try to address all of them that we can in the time allotted. The ones we don't, we'll follow up with you directly via email and try to get your questions answered.
And don't be shy.
And don't be shy, exactly. This is how the morning kind of tees up here. Harry and I are going to riff a little bit on some truths and myths that we've been hearing around the Valley. Harry's going to talk a little bit about labor and talent. Then we'll be followed by James talking about real estate market. And then Tom Foley from Destinametrics will be jumping in and talking about the ever exciting conversation regarding housing, lodging, and accommodations, and what that looks like going forward.
Great. So I think, as you all know, a forum or summit would not be complete without facts and figures. So we thought we'd throw a few out at you up front. A number of these things have been covered already in the Mountain Express Economic Almanac that came out last week. But we think these are some things that are worth being aware of. I would like to call out and congratulate our community on the vaccination rates. This represents at least one dose. If you look at 2 doses, we're at 88%. So we're well ahead of most counties in Idaho and across the country. Unfortunately, there have been local deaths. In the context of the overall situation, we typically have about 130 deaths attributable in Blaine County a year, so that's a substantial percentage of that number. So our thoughts go out to those that have lost people through COVID. We've been very busy as a community, meetings of mayors, meetings of committees, basically trying to keep the economy and our people on a road to recovery from COVID. We've been very fortunate in terms of being able to access government funding, whether through the ARPA program or through the CARES Act. And then there's obviously a new wave of money coming that will have implications for everyone in the community as part of the infrastructure bill of $1.7 trillion. We've also had a lot of new people, and we're going to talk about that during the course of the discussions today and tomorrow. Fundamentally, the community is changing. We have to reflect that change and think about what that means for our growth trajectory and how we see our future. So with that in place, let's move on to truths and myths.
As mentioned before, everybody's heard some sort of a anecdote, some experience they've had firsthand, saw some information or attributed it to some reason or thing or something, and we've kind of compiled I don't know, I wouldn't say necessarily a top 10 list, but I think some of the high and hard ones here that we thought we would address and talk about over the next, it's kind of been the basis of the agenda here for the next 2 days, and we thought we would kind of take a little crack at them and have a little fun with this.
Right. So the first myth or truth, are all newcomers grumpy tourists, Scott?
That is a no and a yes, is what that is. And
Glad you're definitive on this.
Yeah. So what I mean by that is there's been a lot of dynamics in terms of what makes up what people think are grumpy, and it does include us as locals as well as it does newcomers, second homeowners, and even the remote workers that we find ourselves running into at the coffee shop. At the same time, there's been a lot of things that have occurred in this valley in the course of 18 months, probably more in 18 months has probably happened in the last 5 years. And so with the conversations that occur with service workers about people's interpretations of the Constitution, people's opinions about what they've learned on the internet regarding public health, there's no wonder that even the person with the most sunniest disposition isn't just a little chappy these days.
Yeah, tensions are high.
Tensions are high.
Yeah.
Hence this stay sunny thing we've been talking about.
Okay, good.
All right, Harry, you ready for this one?
Yep. Fire away.
So every time I go to the trailhead, right, I see these license plates. It seems like all the time. So is this, and that guy too, getting ice cream, who can rip on the downhill. So tell me, is this, what am I seeing? Is that true?
Yes and no. I think the answer is all the California plates are actually have to be tourist because all the Californians that have moved here have registered with the DMV and changed their plates. So when we look at the DMV information over the last 12 months, out of roughly 1,000 new vehicles and drivers being registered from outside of the state into Blaine County, out of that 1,000, the majority, 362 to be precise, are Californians. However, there are a large number. The balance of those are from other Western states, with the predominance coming out of Washington and Oregon, and a fair number from Texas as well. And I think while the majority of those surrenders were coming into town were over 61, in other words, 637 of those 1,000 are over 61 years old. We did have a younger cohort, and the most popular cohort below the 61 cohort was kind of the 31 to 40-year-old. So we got some youngsters, which is good.
But truth to be told, it is a lot of old Californians. Is that what you're saying?
A lot of old Californians, yes. Yeah. But not necessarily grumpy.
And now they're Idahoans.
Right.
Got it. Okay. What's next?
So, Scott, for you, are short-term rentals ruining our long-term rental market?
Well, there definitely seems to be a mob mentality around short-term rentals these days, for sure. You know, I guess what I would say is that in our valley, the data doesn't show that to be the case, if you believe the information. It certainly is the case in a lot of other places and a lot of other destinations like ourselves. The main difference between a lot of those destinations that we get compared to is just the sheer volume of the housing stock and the accommodations. We just don't have that much, comparatively speaking, to some of the other destinations. And I think that's one of the reasons why it appears to be the case. There's certainly anecdotal issues where that may have been the case, but when you look at the data overall, it doesn't trend that way. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on today.
Okay. Are there a variety of people, or what is the variety of people that make up this place on a year-round basis?
Well, it's gotten, from a travel and visitor perspective, it's way more dynamic than it probably has ever been. These traditions of what we've normally thought of have all kind of been lumped into all sorts of different buckets, and they're all kind of mashed up between remote workers that we've talked about and second homeowners and families and extended stays, visiting with other families that they've met. There's just all sorts of different trends and the reasons for people traveling, whether it's for wellness retreats to all sorts of different things that we're seeing. Traditionally, we've tried, it's hard when you're used to seeing something and it's made up of a little bit different makeup. The one thing that I will tell you that I think is what we're seeing is just this lifestyle economy continues to be a driving force, and it's being made up of lots of different things and lots of different subsets. And what used to be 3 or 4 are now probably 10. And that's a different dynamic for us to try to wrap our minds around, but it's kind of what's going on in the marketplace. The one thing that I will tell you is that the idea of being, the traditional sense of being a ski bum is being revisited. And I think it projects this idea that someone who spends the evenings, maybe a developer working on their laptop at night and being on first chair during the day is kind of revitalized.
That's the new ski bum.
And I think that's the new version of, I don't know about the bum part, but certainly the ski part.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's changing.
Great.
Okay. What do we got next? Oh, here we go. Ready? This is a good one. So here's what I want to know about. There's significant amount of workforce housing projects planned and coming, but why has it been so difficult in our community to put a dent in this?
So this is not a COVID-related phenomena, and this is not a local-only phenomena. We've been wrestling with workforce housing projects for years. We've had a lot of goes. We've had a lot of failures. We've talked about projects that haven't been able to get through the permitting process or out of the ground. The good news is there's a lot of stuff in the pipeline right now. So we have 109 new deed-restricted units that are rising. So Blaine Manor, little bits and pieces here and there. And we have another 60 in permitting, most notably the Bluebird project in Ketchum. But going on beyond that, when we talk about workforce housing, we want to talk about not just deed-restricted, affordable housing. We want to talk about middle-income housing. And there's progress there as well. There are a lot of developers around town who have kind of seen the writing on the wall, have heard the community talking, have seen a bit of the crisis, which we'll talk about in terms of talent attraction in the next segment. And we have 80 new kind of middle-income housing units that are rising. But really encouraging to me, we have another 300 units that are planned out over the next 2 to 4 years. So big improvement over any time in the past. To put it in context, we have about 600 deed-restricted units currently in the community, well below that of other communities, but we're starting to make progress into that inventory, Scott.
So we are making a dent.
We are making a dent.
There's a light at the end of the tunnel.
But there's still not enough.
Right. Okay, so we have infrastructure. So regarding the infrastructure question, tell that to the person, I guess, when I think about this, who's made 4 laps around Atkins Market trying to find a place to park in the very front row.
Yeah. Well, I'd answer it this way. When was the last time that you had to wait for a lift for more than 2 minutes, excluding powder days, of course, or where you had to park more than 2 minutes away from the place that you were trying to do business? While it may not be the Ketchum of the 1980s, we still have capacity to grow our population.
It's all relative is what you're saying.
It's all relative at the end of the day. So, the question is, are we overburdened in terms of buildable land, utilities, roads and bridges, recreational amenities and the like? The answer is it depends. There are ways to plan growth, and I see the city governments looking carefully at that. And there's ways to debottleneck or unpinch point some of these constraints. So again, that's something we'll be talking about going forward over the next couple of days.
Okay. You ready for another one?
There we are.
So it feels like on this front we're, again, kind of maybe slow learners here on this being an issue. in terms of, again, going back to kind of making a dent in things. Is that the case?
Well, at the end of the day, workers are walking for a variety of reasons. Lack of accessible housing may be a significant driver, but it's far from the only one, Scott. I think one of the things that I worry about is we're seeing increasingly competitive wage rates, pay rates for the community, and that's driving some switching. So we have people that maybe were making a reasonable wage for what they were doing at $16 to $18 an hour, and for $25 or $30 an hour, they can be carrying bricks or doing something different. So we're seeing a lot of switching. We're going to talk a little bit later about some of the other reasons why people are switching, but clearly housing is part of that, but it's not the only thing.
Okay. All right, this is the last one.
Last myth or truth. So Scott, destination management and marketing, are they still important? Are they still relevant in an environment when we have people that are upping their roots, moving here wholesale, lock, stock, and barrel, bringing families, people that are coming here to experience the community? How do you answer that?
Yeah, well, logic would tell you probably maybe you don't need that, right? I guess to a certain extent. Gone, without some sort of plan in place and without somebody there to review all the indicators, see what's going on, make recommendations to the business community, listen to what's going on. Organizations like ourselves who are in those roles, I think, owe it to our community to kind of switch up what we've been doing when we see these challenges like we've just been involved in for the last 18 months. And, we have been, as our organization specifically, has been about creating demand. And I think we've now seen our opportunity for us to kind of turn and pivot and start to kind of manage that demand and be able to, we certainly are on the forefront of messaging and to the visitors who are here. And now it's our responsibility to kind of take a holistic view of their path through the valley and what they end up doing and making recommendations and making them aware of things like trail etiquette, maybe things to do that are lesser known things to do to kind of spread out things. And we wouldn't be able to know about those things without having that data and information to be able to share and get that feedback. So, our roles have been taking what we have done, we think relatively well, some may say too well, and reapplying them in the promotion and PR and the marketing piece are tactics to the strategy, and the strategy's now changed. And we find ourselves applying those things in a different manner than we have before. A lot of it is inward-facing, front-facing to the guest, and trying to even now, as we get upon winter, getting ahead of the guest before they even get here to be the more informed. Because ideally, we want to have a more informed guest and someone who's really more in tune with what's going on in the valley and wants to dig in. And the better opportunity we have, I think the better opportunity we have of everybody kind of getting along better and less grumpy people, as we talked about, to kick this off. So That's my answer.
Great, appreciate that. So that concludes our session of myth or truth. We are going to talk about change, and the first element of change that we're going to talk about is going to be the labor and talent crisis. So I'm going to move over to the podium and continue our discussion from there. So you can't turn on a TV or read a blog without hearing about things like the Great Resignation, the jobs crisis, a revolution of work. I mean, there's so many phrases, it's crazy. I do want to be clear that this is a national issue. It's not just a regional or a local issue. So let's take a look under the hood and see what our situation is. So for Blaine County, there's one number that I want to leave you with. It's this one, 61%. Pre-COVID, the workforce participation rate was 67%. So what we've seen is a drop of 6 percentage points over the last 18 months. And that's quite relevant. In a community the size of ours, that's the equivalent of 1,400 job seekers who have fallen away for whatever reason. And compounding that, I think, is the issue of our community has also been heavily reliant on visa workers. And over the last 18 months, we were short visa workers. They were enjoined and stopped at the border. So at the end of the day, you take those two numbers together, that's 1,700 less people looking for work in this community. And that's significant out of a workforce of roughly 10,000. Next. Where's the word art slide? Okay, so I want to go back a slide then, if we could. Why are people leaving the active workforce? Why do they not want to participate in the workforce? There's, again, lots of reasons. Low pay, bad benefits, no housing, no child care, better opportunities elsewhere. I read somewhere that video games are potentially a reason why people, the new generation, spend a lot of time in video games, and they can't work a full-time job and play the video game. You have a lot of different reasons, and there is no one reason that fits all sizes in this community. So we've seen basically people, not available to take up jobs, and again, this is a national issue. If we dig down a little bit and go to the next slide, in terms of some facts and figures about the great hospitality resignation, which, given it's 2/3 of our economy, is a pretty important issue. People are done with hospitality for a wide variety of reasons. Not a surprise. I touched on some of those, including COVID fears and things like that are quite reasonable. However, what's really enlightening to me is the graph on the right that says what would change your mind. Nothing. 50, 60, 70% of that group. So from the standpoint of a critical part of our community's economy, restaurants, lodging, things of that nature, we have a lot of work to do to fill the gaps. And I think everybody here knows that there are gaps out there that need to be filled. So I'm going to take a few minutes and talk about what are some of the opportunities that we have to secure talent. So I mentioned the visa program. This year, touch wood, it looks like Sun Valley Company and to a lesser extent Aspen Ski Co. will be able to get some visas here, whether it's J1s or H1Bs. That will be a welcome relief across a lot of the businesses in our community. And it's particularly important because a lot of these visa workers, they don't just work for the party that brought them to the dance. They also work extra hours, again, primarily in restaurants. So, it's a very important labor pool that we tap into. We've had a lot of people that have moved here and set up professional businesses, small mom and pop shop, an accountant, a lawyer, somebody who's come for a job, and there's a trailing spouse. Those trailing spouses are very valuable. I think it's critical that we find ways to engage them, put them to work. When a new school teacher takes a job, there's usually a trailing spouse. So finding ways to attract and engage those people in your business, I think, is a great opportunity to bring some talent. Gap year. A lot of students have been off for a bit. They've been working remotely. There's opportunities there. There's opportunities as well to engage interns. So you got to think creatively about opportunities. School isn't what it once was. I think you're going to see more and more people questioning the value of or the need for immediately moving to a 4-year education. So how can we take advantage of that? The silver tsunami. As we talked about earlier, a lot of people moving here, 61 plus, retired, semi-retired, just reaching retirement. A number of those people will get bored. A number of those people might be looking for supplemental income. So how can we find a way as a business, whether you're a retail shop or say the resort looking for a yellow jacket, how can we find people to engage either as volunteers, as part-timers, as seasonal workers, or otherwise? And that's going to be a critical issue. The talent issue is, again, there's no one size fits all. There's a lot of different ways you have to think about doing this. It's also important because if we look forward 3, 4, 5, 10 years, the birth rate in the US, in fact, the entire world, is declining. There's a magical number of 2.1 births per family, which is kind of the replacement rate. And across the entire US, we're well below that rate. So as the baby boomers age, we're not backfilling the workforce. We're turning into, the world is actually turning into what Japan is experiencing right now with many, many more people reliant on many, many fewer workers. And that's a generational change, and that's a change which, again, you can't just turn the ship. So you have to be aware of that, and you have to be thinking about how you get talent on a constant competitive basis going forward. Next slide. I think also people need to think about some unconventional solutions. So where are there surpluses that aren't in our market that we can actually take advantage of? One thing that I think is really important is technical education, career education, focused education. We're seeing an awful lot going on in the state, whether it's apprenticeships for welding or culinary. And I think there are a lot of new programs coming, a lot of money going towards this educational set of opportunities. The concept of hybrid work, we're going to talk about this later. Jim Keating's going to talk a little bit about this as a nationwide and a local phenomena. But again, if you can't get the talent here, you can get the talent somewhere else. I was just talking to somebody who has grown their local business from about 50 employees to 250 employees. 3 of those employees are based here. The rest are working remotely. So while it may not be great for boots on the ground, it is great for having a viable business and leveraging that hybrid work environment for that purpose. My picture's a little dark, but that's a robotic arm that flips burgers and does French fries. So technology, obviously, is an opportunity that people have. I think the hospitality industry in particular has maybe been a little bit behind the curve on leveraging technology to serve more customers, provide a better service level. So whether it's robotics or processes, again, in each industry there will be specific opportunities to work and leverage technology. And let's not forget about Boise. Boise has grown at least as fast as we have. So, it's 2 3/4 hours away, door to door pretty much. How can we get some of those workers to decide they might want to come here? How can we get some of those workers to decide that they want to bring or apply their talent to companies that are based here? So I think we have to look, again, outside of our immediate area, whether it's Boise or Twin Falls, and think about this as kind of what can Idaho do to be more competitive, and how can we compete in the race for talent? So again, a lot of different solutions, and no perfect answer for any one individual or one industry. First opportunity for questions. Go in the room first. Courtney?
Does your workforce participation slide include remote workers?
Which slide?
The workforce participation where it drops 6% from 67 to 69.
That is is the slide showing the 61% workforce participation include remote workers? The answer is we don't know. I spoke with the Department of Labor. They are still trying to get, as are many other labor departments across the country, a handle on the number of remote workers that are out there. We believe it's more conventional based on unemployment claims, W-2 information, and the like. So very tough figure to get. Kim?
Is there a difference, did anyone look at the gender difference of like who makes up that population that's not working? Gender or even age?
There's been some work. I don't have the figures at my fingertips, but I do recall it's a predominance of females that have dropped out of the labor force, and that's primarily due, people believe, to lack of affordable childcare. But beyond that, I'm not aware of any dimensions in terms of age or industry specific. Yeah. Question from the audience.
Yeah. Can we businesses make increases in salaries and benefits as a way out of this situation and to attract and maintain staff?
Right. I'm glad you asked me that, because one of my mantras over the last 12 months has been, if you want talent, you're going to need to attract talent. And to attract talent, you're going to need a combination of measures. I think pay is one measure. And we've seen wages go up. The average hourly wage in Ketchum over the last 18 months has gone up 18%, I think I recall. It's also gone up in the other cities. In Haley, it's gone up. As Blaine County, overall, it's gone up. But the question is that enough? Is that enough to bring somebody back into the workforce? We've also seen incentives based on, if you come work for us, we'll be hiring bonus. We've seen other incentives out there. I think it depends on the individual circumstances, but things like childcare, things like access to housing, unconventional mechanisms apart from pay. Pay is an important part of that. Benefits are an important part of that. But the other thing to think about, and I think maybe we'll touch on this later as well, is the work environment. People are looking for something different these days. They're looking for more fun, more engagement, more community. It's not go in, punch the clock, deliver your objectives, and go home. So I think you're finding a lot of employers, and there's lots of advice on this. Again on the worldwide information stream about how you can do that, how you can be a better company to work for. And you're seeing that across the board in companies large and small. Any other questions? Okay, so I will wrap on that, and I will turn the podium over to James Tautkus. James is a member of our board and a member of the Keller Williams real estate team, as well as a ski coach for Ski Ed Foundation, so he has a lot of different perspectives. He's going to talk to us about what the real estate market has just done, which is quite phenomenal.
Check 1, 2. Oh yeah, that's it. I could need this or not need this. It's for the record. Yeah, I would first of all to start with real estate. I mean, if you're paying attention to national trends, we literally are Anytown, USA. What we are dealing with here is the same thing they're dealing with in Mountain Home, Boise, Austin, Texas. Anywhere you go in the country, we're all in the same position. And so, in a lot of ways, it kind of brings us together as a nation. As it turns out, same things, similar things are going on in first world countries overseas as well. But I think to cut to the chase with this segment is affordable housing is a big issue. And whether you're talking about middle income, entry-level purchasing, deed restricted, whatever, all of the above floats underneath this bubble that we need to get in front of right now. The last 25, 30 years in this community was our opportunity to kind of be thoughtful, craft the perfect plan, and get this thing right. Unfortunately, now we're at a time where our backs are against the wall and action needs to be taken. So that being said, let's explore this a little bit further. That's a lovely slide. Okay, so VRBO is kind of the forefront of this conversation. It's a very common and easy conversation to say that VRBO is really triggering a housing issue for all of us. I mean, the reality is, yeah, you're talking about a very small percentage of impact, actually. Because people are going to want to be here, they're going to want to own here, they're going to be here irregardless of what they can do for income on their property. So, if we eliminate the opportunity of short-term vacation rentals, what ends up happening is a lot of the property that's already owned by second, third, and fourth homeowners is really just going to either sit dormant or, very small percentage that might be sold off because of affordability and carry costs. But it's not as great as you'd think. So the reality is if we put a bubble on or a limitation on VRBO, people are still going to own and be here, and their property's just not going to get used versus a vacation rental opportunity for somebody else who's bringing money into our valley as a tourist. What I kind of see as a bigger issue is the locals that own 2, 3 other rental properties who are selling right now, forcing people who are already renting long-term to have to move and find other solutions. So that's what a really thriving hot real estate market does. But with the heat that we're seeing right now, that's what's kind of that's a big picture item that's forcing a lot of great locals that have good jobs here to have to seek other creative solutions like, buying a camper or something of that nature. So with the way things have been going for the last 18 months or so, the real estate market has fundamentally changed. The buyers have different needs. The demand is different. And something that's really notable is that there is a lot of cash in this market. The purchasing power is enormous, and that's even with rates as low as they are. And in a lot of cases, people who are getting lending are still putting over 20% down. So that does not display, for the most part, and you could argue it the other way around depending on what kind of material you're digging into. This does not display a bubble, okay? So this is a rock-solid market. People have a lot of strength and equity behind what they're buying, even yesterday or 2 years from now. And these trends were coming. I mean, I firmly believe that this pandemic is just an acceleration. We would have been here by 2027 or 2030 either way, okay? I think there's a small percentage that maybe this pandemic got people who had the means living in a dense metropolitan area to reevaluate their lifestyles. But for the most part, from a generational standpoint, people were looking for lifestyle. People did want to go live that dream that included making 6 figures and fly fishing 10 hours a week, okay? So the thing about all of it, too, is that when you have a hot thriving real estate market, okay, there's a double-edged sword to it. Yes, prices do go up. Yes, this does become a challenge for a lot of people. But at the same time, a lot of property does percolate to the market, okay? That dream home that you looked for on the fairways with the 3-car garage now all of a sudden is for sale, whereas somebody was probably thinking they were going to hold on to it forever. Or that brand new spec home on Northridge, that's got that back deck with the views of Carbonite you always talked about and loved. Now all of a sudden that's come to market. So, and a lot of land development as well. So would a lot of these projects and things that are occurring right now have happened overnight? No, not at all. But would they have happened over the next 10 years? Yeah, absolutely. These things were coming, okay? So, and that's real estate investment in a nutshell. I mean, the developers in town, the builders in town, I mean, this is what their goals are. So in a lot of ways, goals are being met in the real estate community just at a higher rate than ever before and at a somewhat of a detriment to our community as a whole. So where does that leave us? And the reality is it's created imbalance, okay? Because of the acceleration of all these things, we've been left in a place where we don't have all of the right things in place to maintain the community that we've come to know and love. I think even the folks that question the vitality of affordable housing maybe aren't quite as aware. I mean, there is a large group of this, as a dichotomy of people that make up this community, that makes this wheel go round, whether it be getting a cup of coffee at 7:30 in the morning, or getting a cheeseburger at night, or having decent service at a restaurant. These are things that make our town vibrant, allow people to have fun, and need to occur. So right now, our balance is imperfect. It's not healthy, okay? And that kind of leads you to ask, well, how do we get there, okay? And what we got to be doing is creating more opportunity. We have a 20% increase in affordable housing coming in the very near future, but that's not enough. The absorption, the demand is still too high for that to be enough, and we still need to continue to seek solution. It's unfortunately, we're in a little bit of dire times, and so it is important that we continue to seek these things. So versus talking about this, it's easy to talk about what's happened or this is where we're at, but being proactive and being solution-oriented is always the better, stronger conversation. And there's not one way for us to solve these problems. For the most part, it really is going to take a combination of three things and we'll get there. One is funding, two is leadership, and three is determination. We have to want this, okay? Starting from a strategic standpoint, we've got five bullet points here. One being making sure that using big parcels in the North Valley wisely. Making sure that when, if something were to trigger Simplot or Albertsons or the Shern Tanner properties to come to market, even this Warm Springs Ranch opportunity, we need to make sure that we're thoughtfully using these things and that we're the city and those people who are the gatekeepers to how these things ultimately get used are being smart and strategic about our long-term and short-term trajectories. Two, take advantage of the South Valley land that's still in the commute zone. Okay, there's still a lot of opportunity down there, more so than up here. And we need to make sure as a county and that our municipalities are working together to make sure that we're being thoughtful about that. One program that occurs in other like communities such as Vail or Jackson is this Indeed program where you buy down existing real estate homes existing homes to create some sort of residential restrictive housing. And what I like about how these programs are working in these other places is that they're contribution based. It's not an income base, okay? So again, now we're starting to spread out and talk about not just the dude that's, brewing beer at the Warfield. Now we're talking about people who could be working here at the library and at the schools. It's a contribution base in terms of hours put into our community each week being employed and contributing to this community. Fourth is it's very simple. It's continued with Bluebird and Blaine Manor projects. So again, we got a 20% increase expected in the years to come, but again, it's clear because of demand and absorption that there's still very much more that needs to come from that. And then lastly, we need the public and private sectors to be working harder together to create more solution. Luckily, I do believe from a lot of conversation that I have on a weekly and daily basis, there are a lot of private sectors that are willing to forego higher cash out opportunities to create something that benefits the community. So for those of you, I can't necessarily speak to those things without sounding out of place, but again, those things are coming and they're here. This is circulating. And then furthermore, our major employers like St. Luke's, school systems, et cetera, we need to also get proactive and be solution oriented. We cannot wait around for somebody to wave the magic wand and everything gets solved. We all are in this together and need to create these opportunities as a whole. So to further that, with some of the possible mechanisms to facilitate these things, okay, outside of private funds, which, again, I believe from, my weekly and day-to-day conversations, these things are occurring and are coming, provided that the gatekeepers can help create those opportunities with them. So again, that's the partnership conversation we talked about in that last bullet point. But one is leverage federal funding in terms of mechanism, excuse me. One solution here is leveraging federal funding. There's a lot. The infrastructure bill just got signed yesterday, day before, and there's a ton of money that will be coming, and can be used towards affordable housing and for the communities to be able to support these types of projects. So, taking a hard look at things of that nature. Another thing too is from a municipality and county standpoint, making sure that we're evaluating our ordinances and our zoning to make sure that we can accommodate for these things. I think Bellevue is a great example of trying to create those opportunities. However, unfortunately, we're looking at from a from a utility standpoint, because you do need to support these things. We do need to have sewer, water, power. All of these things creates a greater stress on what's already existing. So again, we need to have some really big picture thinking along with all this. And then lastly, using the lot funding from the lot taxes and in lieu funds, and being proactive about using those funds towards these types of projects. Because make no mistake, the whole health of our community, this entire valley, is predicated on making sure that these things occur. Okay, so again, I circle back to the beginning. Time in this and the real estate market is moving faster than ever. It's at light speed, straight ahead on a linear direction, and now is the time that we need to be getting in front of these things and being more thoughtful, critical, and actionable towards them. The time for perfect planning is behind us. Now is the time for doing. So, that being said, questions? Spencer Cordovano.
Jim, do you think that there would be an opportunity to put buyers into the market if we use the in lieu housing fund to support local workers in the form of a down payment?
What's that?
Do you want to repeat that?
Check. James, do you think that we could increase the buying force of local workers by providing a loan to them out of the in lieu housing fees that the city's holding?
Well,
would that create more buyers?
You're really teeing me up there, Spence.
Answer it however you want.
I'm not looking at the city's the in lieu of balance sheets. I realize that there's a couple of different theories on how to increase those funds. I think what we've been reading as of late coming from the city is that, we do know that they need to come up and they do not reflect accurately what should be charged for that to be a healthy program. So they do need to come up. However, how we do that is definitely an arguable solution. I suppose if that had a healthy trajectory or it got to a healthy balance, then it is possible to create something of that nature. It's just that I from my own personal opinion, I have to believe there may be some other things in the way to get there. However, I do know that those in lieu funds are supposed to support and help the community in that way.
Right, and that could be
Not necessarily in lending, but in
yeah, and that could be tricky.
creating.
So, in your view of the marketplace, if buyers had access to larger down payments, would that increase purchasing in the realm of workforce?
I think at this time with interest rates the way they are, that could be likely. I mean, the down payment is pretty challenging. I mean, one reality is if you talk to any realtor that's been here since the 70s, that's always been a challenge. And it's, and as well as I with buying property, the carry cost in a lot of instances ends up being the easy part. It's not exactly a foreign automobile here. The down payment is actually the hard part in getting there. Yeah, and I think the one thing that does like kind of categorize a real estate bubble is when people have less than 20% into the home at buying time. So in a way that would put a lot more financial risk on the city. So I don't know if I agree with making that a thing, but I think I do understand your point in that I do think there are solutions that can be thoughtfully crafted that are win-win for both sides.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Another question.
James, I have a question for you. Scott,
Sure.
with Visits on Valley. So Harry was talking about the labor crisis, talking about that housing issue. Is this and to quote my friend Bob Crosby over here, a Wayne Gretzky comment about skating to the puck as opposed to skating to where the puck's going? So what I mean by that is like by the time we
Right.
see these realities
Right.
coming and what we're facing in terms of shortage from a labor perspective and the need that we have to support them with housing, those two lines start to intersect in a different manner.
Well, is it okay if I recraft that metaphor into something that makes a little bit more sense to me?
Please.
It'd be like the quarterback throwing the ball to where the receiver is when he's throwing the ball versus where the receiver will be when the ball gets to him. So you're talking about leading the receiver.
Yes, anticipation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that definitely, I think both those lines have to be, I did not mean for this to become so political, but I think both those lines do need to be seen. I think when we talk about being thoughtful with how we go with these mechanical and strategic approaches, both of those, it's not black and white, and those things do need to be sought after. Even after we create enough housing that supports the workforce in this community, we still need to have a long-term plan in zoned areas that still support future development, whether we need it or not at that moment. So yeah, that in essence would be our opportunity to maybe be more thoughtful about the future and create that perfect plan. But again, as you said, there's a second line, which is more immediate, of skating to the puck or to the receiver, and that's where we're at right now. So both tie into one another for sure. They're not mutually exclusive.
One more question.
Okay.
What do we need our politicians to do, or better yet, what can we do as citizen business owners to help with this local housing crisis?
Well, I think on some level, I mean, again, this is personal opinion, but I think on some level we need to continue to stay rational and keep our head on straight about this. But second of all, I think we do need to be reaching out to the people that represent us in government. I don't think that just by reading the paper and going for a cup of coffee in town do you get the whole picture. I think if you think you've got a great solution idea or something that's worth being offered, you need to be reaching out to the folks that are in City Hall and leaders in this community and sharing those ideas, because that one idea might not be the answer, but there could be something in there that does lead to the greater good. So I think, it's great that we have these conversations, but the outcomes of them, and if you really believe you've got something to offer, they need to get to our leaders. Great. All right. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, SVED and Visit Sun Valley, and thank you, Harry.
Great, thanks, James. I appreciate it. Up next is a discussion regarding accommodations and lodging in the Valley. And we have with us today is Tom Foley. Tom is the Director of Business Intelligence for Intopia and Destimetrics. Destimetrics is a program that we subscribe to that taps into the lodging community and the information that they provide in regards to occupancy, and more importantly, forward-looking occupancy of what reservations looks like in the next 6 months, which is incredibly valuable for us. And we're able to leverage that over year, and to see what the trends are. And Tom has been very helpful in us doing the analysis to understand what's going on in the marketplace for us from a visitation perspective. Recently, over this spring, we did an analysis of the entire accommodations and revisited the what we call the transient inventory study. And Tom was instrumental in being able to look at that data and put analysis together of what's transpired over the course of the last 5 years. And we've also taken a little bit more of a deeper look into the short-term rental as well as those channels, including Airbnb and VRBO, and what's going on there for our destination. And so I want to welcome Tom. He's spent a lot of time in the mountain destinations and has spoken a lot of these kinds of venues and events. And yeah, look forward to getting your take on the data and the research that you've done for us, Tom.
Thanks, Scott, and thank you, everybody, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. It is always good to hear an informed conversation taking place with professional people being thoughtful and applying the things that they bring to bear on what are difficult and complicated and, yes, politicized. I heard just a few minutes ago, sorry that it had gotten political, but these are political conversations. They impact, after all, whole communities. My goal here is to not do what I necessarily normally do, which would be to get in front of you and present a whole bunch of slides and talk about a bunch of data. But I am going to provide a few slides, a little bit of data, and some context about the things that we're seeing at Intopia, first of all, across 1,700 participating properties around the United States and Canada, but also from the Destimetrics point of view, which concentrates on what's going on in mountain communities, excuse me, and beach communities. And from an Insights Collective point of view, and Insights Collective is a think tank group that I'm the president of as well, and we've been talking about most of these issues for the past year and a half or so, and really having good informed conversations. And I've gotten a lot out of that, and I think there's some interesting information to share. So I want to go ahead and share a screen with you folks and let you take a look at what I am looking at. Hopefully we're seeing that and you can still hear me after the share, is that correct? I'm going to proceed as if, and hopefully we're all good to go. So starting out with a peek at a dead slide. So what I'm going to do is stop sharing for a moment and see if we can't manage to correct this issue. Half a moment, please. There we go. I'm back, so we'll try that once again. Am I being heard? And hopefully we're now up and going. Looks like we're live, so sorry for the glitch. Love the tech. One of the issues we've been dealing with. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about right off the bat, first of all, is that the conversation that you're having, you're really not alone in this. In fact, of the destinations at the Western Mountain Resorts in which Destimetrics is involved, 100% of them are having conversations around workforce housing, around short-term rentals, about in-migration or changes in ownership, about the real estate market, about sustainable tourism. These are all issues that are happening everywhere. And so this is helpful a little bit when we think about the fact that we are part of, while we are communities and individualized, and there are unique aspects to every one of these communities, The end game is that the underlying factors impacting you in Sun Valley and the people in Vail and the folks in North Lake Tahoe are really all the same. They're being driven by changes in how consumers behave, by changes in the marketplace, by changes in how homeowners are behaving. And how everybody responds is going to be a little bit different, but I think there are opportunities also to learn from what other destinations are seeing. So to give you an idea of just how not alone you are and what destinations are looking at and seeing and experiencing. As part of the Insights Collective, we went to our buddies RRC associates who sit as part of that think tank, and we sent a survey out to the ski area management, the SAM members, and got about 150 responses back, and they were pretty strong. One of the questions we asked was, do you feel the availability of housing for the workforce in your region is? And 41% of the respondents said this is the most critical problem in the region. And 39% said it's one of the more serious problems. That's 80% of respondents out of 150 respondents saying, yeah, this is the deal that we need to deal with right now. And one of the reasons is there are so many tangential things both ahead of the problem, but also that can come from how we choose to resolve the problem. So that's important to know. The next is understanding what some of the causes are. So we thought we'd go out and say, has in-migration by new households, so folks coming in either from urban centers or other ski areas into the community resulted in reduced workforce housing supply in your community? And 69% say, yeah, it absolutely has. Now, the thing is, we don't exactly know why or how, so we need to dig into that a little bit more. 10% said it hasn't. And a full 21%, 1 in 5 people, actually don't know. And that's because it is actually a really complicated question about whether or not new households are actually reducing workforce housing or if they're just reducing available housing. Those are unique questions. And the other is, do you really have a handle on what's going on? Do you have a reasonably accurate count of the extent of in-migration and new residents coming into the community? And 23%, so about a quarter, said yes, we do have a good handle, and a full 77% said they do not know. Those that do know are getting data from census. It's not complete yet. Census tends to lag. They're getting it from home sale rolls and tax rolls and so forth. So getting a good handle on what's happening in the community is a difficult thing to do as well. And that's a good starting point. The conversations I'm hearing are actually centering around that, so that's really good to know. So when we think about Sun Valley and professionally managed inventory and how that's going and what's growing or isn't, we want to talk about, first of all, professionally managed exclusively. So professionally managed rather than rent by owner or STR market. And when we look at Sun Valley, the professionally managed inventory is actually growing faster than it is in much of the industry. But the industry type is shifting, or the inventory type is shifting in Sun Valley. So what's happening is Sun Valley has actually seen a pretty good influx of units that are managed either by property managers or by hoteliers or moteliers, to coin a phrase, available to the transient market to generate lodging tax and bring visitors to town. But there has been a change in what that inventory type is a little bit in the mix. So if we go back and take a look at the transient inventory study that Scott mentioned a little bit earlier, and just take a look at the changes in units on the left-hand side of this screen and pillows on the right-hand side. What we're looking at here is in the light gray, we're looking at the number of units on the left-hand side by each lodging type, whether it's private home rentals available, hotel, motel, lodge are grouped together, or condominiums. And the light blue, is the 2021 number. So we can see the changes in inventory, and all inventory types have grown over the course of the last 4 years. That works as a positive. But the largest growth has obviously taken place in hotel, motel, lodge. You guys are on the ground, so you don't need to be told that, but it's good to see it quantified here. That's one metric, and that really represents sort of by transaction, because a transaction tends to book a key, and a key represents one of these unit types. The right-hand side of the screen is pillows, and we've seen obviously a nice corresponding growth in hotel, motel, lodge pillows, and a pretty significant growth in condominium pillows. And that's just basically because even though there are relatively few new condominium units being added, they tend to add 8 to 10 pillows per unit, whereas the hotel motel adds about 3 pillows per unit when you average it out. So there's been an increase in pillows in condominiums and hotel motel lodge. There's been an increase in units, mostly in hotel motel lodge. And the rest of the units have pretty much stayed static, as I said. So relatively speaking, there are more hotel motel lodge units out there now than there were 4 years ago, and that's a little bit shift in the mix. And that has to do with development, what is getting built, what isn't getting built, and what is showing up in the professionally managed inventory. So that's the change in the professionally managed inventory for transient stays, and we want to be clear about that. The next, though, is really where we run into the hot topic, which is the rent by owner, which is what I call it, or short-term rental inventory that is available in Sun Valley. And contrary to perception, based on the data that we collected for the transient inventory study, the short-term rental inventory is actually relatively flat or even down during the course of the pandemic. So what does that mean? How do we measure that? Well, what we're talking about here is listings. It's very hard to get an actual handle on defining the rent by owner or short-term inventory. There's a lot of units that may have licenses, but are they showing up on Vrbo and Airbnb for rental? Or are they being used differently? So I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. Let's just take a look at what's happened with the STR inventory over time. And in this chart, we're looking at the full calendar year, 2017 on the right-hand side in the orange bar, through to 2020 on the left-hand side in the orange bar, and the number of listings annually in Sun Valley and the greater area geographically. The black line going through represents the year-over-year change from the previous year. So for example, in 2018, there were 6,781 listings for short-term rental units in Sun Valley. That's a 64.8% increase from 2017 when there were 4,115. That jump, by the way, during the 2017-2018 calendar year is really common. It has a lot to do with how Airbnb was building their model, some acquisitions that took place over the course of that time, and a real introduction of professionally managed units showing up on the short-term rental industry websites. In other words, property managers are saying, hey, here's another channel that we can use to put units out for rent. And so they've got listings going on their own site and on the STR sites. So that's really interesting about this is that in 2019, we then saw a 13.8% increase in inventory. That's pretty organic and in keeping with what we saw in the rest of the inventory as well. Then 2020 hit, and surprisingly, that inventory didn't really change. In fact, it went down just a little bit, down 1.1%, 7,631 listings. And the difference is what happened during the pandemic. And units came off very much during the pandemic. So looking at May through, really June through December in 2020, year over year, there was a big decline in the listings that were available for rent through those websites. And that goes back to, and again, I'm going to get to it, use type and how units are getting used, not necessarily where they're listed or where they're potentially being used. What's interesting is to take a look at and get 2021 in there as well. Well, because of the timing of our transient inventory study, which is where this data came from as well, the best way we can do that is to take a look at January through May of each of the last 5 years, and that gets us in the ballpark and more current then. So on the left-hand side, what we're looking at is 3,191 listings on Vrbo and Airbnb for January through May of 2021. That is a 2.4% decrease from 2020, which was a 4.5% increase from 2019. So in the early parts of 2020, pre-pandemic, we did see an increase in listings of 4.5%, but 2021 actually saw that draw back down because 2021 was really actually pandemic time, January through May. And so we do see, when we think about the pandemic as a denoter, there is a division between pre and post, but it's not necessarily what we would expect, right? It is actually a pull down instead of a bump back up. So then we get into thinking about use type and how does a unit get used? So as we start thinking about short-term rentals and their place in the community, there's a lot of factors involved. And one is, are they professionally managed units that are showing up in the short-term rental marketplace? That's one, because if they are, and we're thinking about how we manage that, we've got to think about that as part of this denominator, because it gets very complex from there. The second is, how's a unit being used? Use type is probably an easier way or a better way to think about things than whether or not it is listed, because use type changes. So there may be a pool of 5,000 units available in the community, and let's pretend that's the case. Of that, 40% of them, let's say, are full-time, fully occupied. Their use case is they are permanent residents, and they don't end up on the rental market, except for maybe once in a while someone goes away for a weekend and lists that unit, and it shows up as a listing on the STR sites. But then there are the second homeowners, and those ones we need to think of in terms of pre and post-pandemic. The pre-pandemic second homeowner lived in an urban center, had a place up in the mountains, and came up to it from time to time and otherwise had it available for short-term rental on the market through these listings, or perhaps might have had it for long-term rental for workforce housing, depending upon the unit. The third is units that are exclusively for rental and for long-term or transient stays only, and the owner never comes to town. One of the things that really happened over the course of the past year was a shift in how second homeowners were behaving, where second homeowners became part of that in-migration. They said, I can work from home, the kids are being schooled virtually, or at least they were last year. Let's go spend our time doing distance travel, which means getting away from the urban center and away from the crowds, and we're going to go to Sun Valley and we're going to spend our time in our second home there, and that's where we want to be. That pulls units out of the rental market. Nights available goes down. If that unit also happens to be listed with a professionally managed property manager, the nights available might go down, but it's still a unit within their inventory, so that number doesn't change. So now we have to, again, compartmentalize and think about how short-term rentals listings work compared to how professionally managed listings work. So that has added some added churn to this particular marketplace. Add into that the fact that you've got real estate transactions, which I know you guys were talking about, that are red hot everywhere. So you're not unique there, but you are unique in a couple of ways. But overall, everybody's market is hot. And that was creating a change in this STR market as well in a couple of ways. Some were people who were taking advantage of the boom to buy into property while it was moving upwards, but they had no intention of occupying it full time. Others was the Silicon Valley guy who's earning somewhere in the $200,000 range, and he was looking for a place that he could manage to get into. Some of that comes at the expense of workforce housing, but it's hard to tell exactly how much because of the stratification gap between those that are financially independent, particularly in your community, from the tourism economy, and those that provide the support and services to the tourism economy. So use type, as you can see, is a pretty strategic and critical piece of the equation. We want to keep an eye on that at all times. So what we end up running into is this conundrum when we think about ourselves as a destination travel location, as a desirable destination. We've got an economy that is built upon and dependent upon the destination traveler, and we have to make inventory available to them. And so we have to make sure that there is short-term lodging available, whether it's a hotel, motel, lodge, condo, or private home rental. And we can then start to think about the avenues through which we want to make that inventory available. But at the same time, because we are a tourism economy, we're expected to be able to provide staff services, staff for services to make sure that we can meet what is a pretty high benchmark based on prices across the ski industry. And so do we have enough people to be able to meet that standard that justifies the cost of a room or the cost of a lift ticket or whatever other cost there might be, a meal, or the cost of a drink down on Main Street. So those are things that we need to balance out. And that leads back to the question of what do we want to be as a destination? How do we want our mix to work? What is the kind of economy that we've got? Do we start to invite more businesses into the business park to generate different revenue? Do we think about tourism in terms of right person, right place, right time, right dollars, as opposed to everybody at the same time? And how do we make sure, of course, that we can accommodate the needs of a support and service staff in a destination, again, particularly Sun Valley, that has, as I say, a pretty broad stratification between those two players and a big gap in between. I will add, by the way, that workforce housing is one of the reasons that staffing is difficult, and we know that, and that's been well quantified. There are other issues that the travel industry has in general that it needs to overcome in order to attract staff back. It's not just about housing, though that is a big complicator in mountain communities. We know, for example, that 35% of those people who lost their jobs at the beginning of the pandemic from the travel industry have no intention to return to the industry and have actually said that they can't even be incentivized at any price to return. So there are obviously other underlying issues. That data, by the way, comes from Joblist and Bloomberg. It's an interesting report. An additional 50% of them say they will not return to the same job within the travel industry, though they will return to the travel industry. But they're looking for career advancement, and that can incentivize them. So it becomes something that is not necessarily as controllable at the town or county or state level as it might be. There's also a more granular grassroots approach that the travel industry in general, and it has to start locally in all destinations, have to do to make sure that it's an enticing opportunity. And one of those things is workforce housing, which makes it a challenge. So I already touched on work from home and remote learning, and how second homeowners are changing their behavior and new residents coming into the community. The other is that, there are some owners that are cashing out. And so one of the results of the changes in consumer behavior and consumer markets is an actual change in the makeup of a town. And we're seeing that happen now across a lot of mountain communities that had a very localized feel. They had their unique feel and their unique sort of vibe when you got into town. And that was because there were a lot of people in those communities who were, first of all, they were lifties and servers and so forth, and that brings a really cool vibe of one sort. And then you've got those people that moved there 25 or 30 years ago to live the lifestyle and have built the town around the image of what they had in mind. And it's built up and it's got that flavor and it's really cool. And then you've got this other person that is financially independent from the economy or the vibe of the town that has moved to town and is either living there full-time or part-time, but plays a role in the flavor of the town. The change that we're seeing with the migration of second homeowners and their conversion to full-time residency is actually having all sorts of socio and political impacts on the communities. For example, elections that might have gone one way might now go another, because you've now got, rather than a mountain resident and a fairly traditional way of voting for them, you've now got an urban resident who might be thinking differently or have different priorities. You've also got people who might be less invested in the long-term viability of the current economy because they're financially independent from it, and so will vote or support issues differently as the town develops. This is another one that's been taking place. So there are a couple of things that are happening along the socio lines that change how the school board's made up. Another good example. But there are other considerations as well when we think about this, because we have to think about infrastructure. Do we have enough broadband to accommodate the town? Are there enough parking spaces to accommodate the town? What about the electrical grid? And there's noise pollution and light pollution, all these things that come from a changing and growing local base. In the meantime, a lot of those people that bought 25 years ago have said, I can do pretty well selling this property right now. I'm out, I'm off to somewhere else, or I'm going to buy a less expensive unit in town and move into that, which might have otherwise gone towards workforce housing. So the changes become really broad and dynamic, and this does all tie into what is the long-term plan. And I heard that mentioned during the previous session. Begin with the end in mind about where you want to go, because pulling one string over here is going to move something over there, as opposed to pulling what the string is directly attached to. And I've already talked a little bit about this the gap between the financially independent folks in Sun Valley and those that are otherwise dependent upon the tourism economy. So that's just some of the outlook that I've got based upon a lot of hard data and a lot of research over the course of the last 2 years, conversations that I have like this with folks like yourself that are really involved and want to make sure that we've got that out there. And a couple of questions that come to my mind as well that I think for the moment are rhetorical, but I put them out there. And one of them is, if you approve new workforce housing units today, when would they be ready to be occupied? And that's actually a valid question, because it's typically a 36 to 60 month window to get something occupiable if you're starting from breaking ground. And in the meantime, what do you do in the interim? Do you change the goals of the economy? Do you change what you expect from lodging taxes? Do you change inventory availability and use types? Can you convert an old hotel to workforce housing? We're seeing a lot of that happen in Steamboat, for example. And others are, how do you manage some of that short-term rental inventory? If you limit or curtail short-term inventory, do you limit new licenses or do you curtail them entirely? And if you do so, are you able to accommodate the lost pillows elsewhere within the inventory? The short-term rental market is actually really, really valuable, and probably more so now than it has been, to destination travel. And the reason that it is that people are looking for an experience that is removed from common doors, common hallways, common check-in points. They also have a lot of savings wrapped under their pillows, $2 trillion worth of savings in the last 20 months that they can pop back into the economy and spend, and that's what's driving part of the pent-up demand, that we see out there. So that's worth keeping in mind as well. Do you do more harm than good if you curtail those, or do you have to think about using a scalpel as opposed to an axe? And what are you going to do to accommodate if you can't get those workers in? How do you deal with that and maintain the service levels? Are you considering service automation at restaurants or at rental booths or for new parking systems and so forth and so forth? And in the end, these changes are really holistic in nature about the entire destination, with regenerative tourism as conversations, environmental stewardship, partnership with the National Forest Service, and so forth. And when you bring that all together, you want to make sure that you're creating this holistic plan that takes it all into account. There's nothing in the conversation that is binary. Everything is tertiary and more. There's too many dependencies. And if you can't manage to do that, do you end up with a product that, compared to other places or your prior state, suffers due to staffing that drives down dollars and in the end changes who is willing to come to town for what purposes? So that in what would be not entirely a nutshell, because it took me a while, is what I'm thinking and how I see things right now on the destination travel market. So I want to hand it over just to see whether or not we have any questions from the group that I might be able to answer, or any clarifications that folks might be looking for.
Yeah, so I have a question. You touched on this a little bit, but is there a right balance between the STRs and to hotel? What's the right balance?
That's a really good question. It's hard to answer because I don't think there is a one size fits all. I might have had a different answer a couple of years ago where I would have said, it really, there were probably some mathematical ratios that we talked about in 2017 and 2016 that really seemed to make really good sense. But because use type is so much more important than whether or not a unit can be listed, whether or not it is being listed is the thing. I think it becomes a really personalized answer based upon where the destination wants to go, what type of guest you're trying to attract, and what is that available inventory. If most of what's showing up on your market for rental is $1,000 a night or a $500 a night, and you remove that, what does that do to the ability to attract that guest that you want to that community? And so your answer might be different than what I would see in Panama City, Florida, or Aspen, for example. Though I will say you guys are probably closer to Aspen as an example than other places. So I don't really have a good answer for it because I think it requires a lot of careful thought around 8 or 9 variables and some direction, you know, a point on the horizon that you can lean to.
Thank you. And we have another question.
Hey, Tom, thanks. Are you seeing other resort communities charge business license fees for short-term rentals?
Yes, yeah, there are some. I will say that there are communities that have gone down this road considerably sooner than Sun Valley that have gotten further down it, and they've got a lot of scars on their back as a result, but they've been able to then lead the way, set some expectations in the marketplace. I would actually recommend that town leaders and politically leaders and community leaders and marketing leaders, you know, reach out and have those conversations. I think towns are willing to share for the good of the industry more than anything else, because in the end, I think mountain towns really have a collective industry and opportunities to share that information. So yes, is the short answer, because I'm not very good at just short answers. I think it's something that ought to be looked into in every community because it's viable and here, that something ought to be happening.
And furthermore, what are you seeing for quantifying a short-term rental? As you spoke about Florida, we know some places in Florida are up to under 90 days.
Right.
Details aside, any info on that note?
Yeah, so Florida as a state charges lodging tax on a 90-day stay. And so that's across all counties in Florida. For the most part, short-term rentals, and this is why I'm actually going to get into this now. A short-term rental, in my mind, and going back to 2004 or so, or actually 1999, in the old Crater days, a short-term rental was anything that was subject to lodging tax, right? So it was in most mountain communities, it was 30 days or less, and in most Southeast communities, it's 90 days or more to accommodate the visa requirements for inbound snowbirds from Canada. That's why it's 90 days in Florida. So 30 days is the most common. So we started calling it the rent by owner market because a short-term rental, in my mind, is anything subject to lodging tax, right? But I'll defer and use the term short-term rental. I think that 30 days makes the most sense. But I also believe that we need to be nimble and think about that, particularly now, because there is this advent of monthly stays. People with the work from home, and who knows what's going to happen to school. Many people have chosen to put their kids out of school and homeschool them. And so there's an opportunity for people to travel for longer. So the question then becomes, how do you want to structure a tax that is sustainable through this new economy of longer stays? So 30 is the standard right now. It falls in with the lodging tax guidelines in communities, and that would be a good starting place. But I think you need to think about what kind of guests you're looking to attract.
Thanks, Tom. We also have another question from the viewers. Do you think we should follow Park City and require an on-site management office for our STR operator?
I don't know. I think that comes down mostly to dealing with issues around noise and overcrowding and so forth. And I think there are different ways to do it. There's an accountability issue that comes up there that helps. It helps, an on-site helps deal with accountability. So I think there's some benefit there. But I think it comes down to whether or not there is a problem and a perceived problem, and what does it solve is the question. I haven't talked to Park City in a couple of months, but it would be interesting to know what problem they are solving by doing that. One thing it does do is it may create a roadblock. It certainly creates a new property management company of some sort that's overseeing at least some part of that operation. And I guess you would have to build in some accountability around why that office needs to be there. What are the expectations and the benchmarks that they need to hit in order for that to be sustainable? Not a great answer, I'm afraid. A bit wishy-washy.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Appreciate your time. Great
All
information.
right.
Good through.
Happy to help out. Anything else I can do, just let me know, Scott. Always good to work with you guys.
All right. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Okay, I would like to thank everybody. High five. For participating. We had a little technical glitch still, so this ended up being simulcast on YouTube as opposed to Vimeo. So if you hear anybody that didn't get a chance to see it, we'll send you the link and you can switch them over to that platform. We'll try to get it sorted out by tomorrow. Tomorrow we start at 12:30, same broadcast location here. But we have a little bit more time because we have a little bit more content. So today was kind of a teaser. Tomorrow we will talk about structural limitations, carrying capacity, risks to growth. We'll also talk about opportunities and, oh good, there we go. There's the info for those of you that want to figure out how to connect in. We'll also talk about kind of the state of the winter coming a little bit. And we will be engaging in a mixed media format, kind of with some panelists here, some panelists coming in remotely. So it'll be a mix of different things. So the agenda for tomorrow, quick intro, recap where we were. Zartico team will talk about behaviors in the community, which are going to be very interesting, some new data, new technology. I mentioned the structural limitations, opportunities for resilience, and then kind of a wrap-up at the end. So we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you for participating today. It was nice to break last year's model when 4 of us were speaking to a totally abandoned audience in the limelight. So, we're on our way to recovery. And again, thank you, everybody, for participating. Signing off.